Hello everyone, and welcome back to our latest in the Oxford Economics series of occasional podcasts. I'm Gabriel Stein, Director, Asset Management Services, and I'm sitting here together with one of our economists, Sarah Fowler, and we're going to talk about the Vietnamese economy, on which Sarah has recently written a research briefing for our clients. Sarah, Vietnam seems to be one of the current star economists of East Asia. Why is that? What's going on?
So this year, what first attracted my attention to Vietnam this year, its export growth has risen by almost 10% in the year to date, whereas other countries in Asia, China, Korea, Singapore, they've all seen their exports fall this year, both non-oil as well as oil. So that really made Vietnam stand out. Last month we had to upgrade our forecast. We expect it to grow by more than 6% this year. Beyond China and India and Asia, this is going to be the fastest growing major Asian economy.
So they're an export champion. That's it, is it?
Well, no. The growth this year has been very broad-based. They've got a population of around 90 million, bigger than Germany, around a third bigger than the UK. Consumer demand has been very strong. The macroeconomic environment has become much more stable in recent years, which has helped the steady growth. Even before the level shift in fuel prices last year, they've gained much greater control of inflation, and the export diversification, which we're going to talk about more, has helped the current account position improve just immeasurably from 5 years ago. So there's a lot of factors going for them. It's not just the exports.
But you did mention export diversification. What do you mean?
Well, there's three factors really that have really helped Vietnam be a champion for FDI in the region.
Yeah.
So the big population, which has a very favourable demographic trend relative to other countries in the region, such as China or other emergers such as Russia.
Okay.
And the skills have been rising. If you surveys like the Global Competitiveness Survey, they have been, the population is becoming more educated, and the FDI the domestic content is rising, so the foreign investors are helping the domestic population and investing in Vietnam as well as just the multinational export businesses.
Okay, so what you're saying is this is not just the case of another East Asian low-cost, low-value-added producer taking the place of perhaps some of the lowest low-value-added manufacturing from China or something.
Well, in some ways that is what they're doing, but they're doing it particularly well, that they can do it incredibly fast. Vietnam now accounts for around 10% of exports from emerging Asia ex-China. That's up markedly in recent years. And one factor that's helped them a lot, the speed and the progress they've made with the trade liberalisation. Since they joined the World Trade Organization in 2007, they've made massive progress in liberalising their trade. Just yesterday, the free trade deal with the European Union, where about 20% of their exports go, they agreed that in the summer, and just yesterday that was approved by both Vietnam and the EU. So that's going to be a big boost. Vietnam is also one of the signatories to the TPP deal that was agreed a couple of months ago.
But still not ratified, of course.
No, and you raise an interesting issue there, because there are clauses as part of that. They have to open up more sectors that have previously been quite protected, they have to open up more sectors to FDI. And actually they have made some good progress with that.
But on that score, I mean, let's face it, provided the Americans ratify the TPP, presumably the Vietnamese are not going to turn around and say, oh, we're not going to open up sectors A and B to FDI. They will be, because if I'm not altogether wrong, you mentioned that the US is still Vietnam's largest export partner. So if the Americans go ahead with the TPP, the Vietnamese will fall in line and fulfill their commitments.
Yes, I would say the one contentious issue that may take several years on the labour market, the TPP has a clause which specifies that labour workers must be allowed to join independent unions.
Oh dear, yes.
But Vietnam has one workers' union run by the Communist Party. And ahead of the 5-yearly Communist Party Congress they have every 5 years next year, it may be that making progress towards allowing independent unions may be somewhat difficult. So that is the area we see as possibly a bit slow moving. Although the gain from the TPP being ratified is so big, we do see them getting there.
Now, looking a bit around, because obviously it's all very well, the US is Vietnam's largest trading partner and so on, they have a free trade with the EU, but surely much more important is the regional trade. And if you can touch on that, but also I hear what you're saying about Vietnam's advantages, but what singles Vietnam out? Why is it that, say, a country like Indonesia or Malaysia doesn't, why aren't they doing as well? What makes Vietnam really stand out here?
I think there's two factors here. The first one, just the number of trade deals that Vietnam has done in recent years. For example, Indonesia, Cambodia, Laos, China, Korea are not part of the TPP.
Hold on, so Laos and Cambodia are not part of the TPP?
No.
That's interesting because, of course, both of them are de facto Vietnamese vassal states. So anyway, that's for another day. Continue, you were saying. So they've done more trade agreements, yes?
And I would say also the macroeconomic improvement and the political stability there marks them out in comparison to Malaysia and Indonesia. In Indonesia, the new president, Widodo, he's made a lot of progress over the last year, but he has struggled in some respects because he doesn't have a large consensus in Parliament. He struggled to spend the budget plans as fast as they would have liked, and that's been a big issue for them. And in Malaysia, with short-term debt being very high, Malaysia does stand out as quite vulnerable to global market volatility within the region. So in that respect, Vietnam is slightly more protected than those countries.
You talk about political stability, and of course Vietnam is still a communist dictatorship. Are there any political or domestic financial risks that perhaps we should bear in mind when looking at the outlook?
Yes, I mean, we've said the current account has improved massively and inflation is much more under control, but the public finances are still a bit of a concern. The government are aiming to cut the government deficit to 5% within a year or two, but we see downside risks to this because there's still a lot of infrastructure spending that needs to be done, and it's infrastructure, healthcare, education spending has been very strong in recent years, which has been great in attracting the FDI and helping the export diversification. But at the same time, that has meant that the fiscal deficit has widened. and creating a bit of a risk there.
And do you think they will manage to bring it down to the 5%?
Yes, they will, but gradually, possibly not quite as fast as they've hoped.
And what about, one of the salient issues, of course, right now in the world economy is low energy prices. How does that affect Vietnam? Because if I'm not altogether wrong, they are also an oil exporter, although very small, aren't they?
They are, yes, and also in foodstuffs like coffee, they're also a big player. That's how the export diversification they've done in recent years. So now around 25% of their exports are now ICT equipment,
right.
Largely telecoms, whereas 5-10 years ago that was a very small percentage. So what that's done is protect them from lower export revenues for oil and for foodstuffs this year. So that's been quite a big factor in helping their exports grow very strongly this year, where elsewhere in the region we've seen sizable fall.
Okay, well, it sounds as if there's a pretty good case there. To sum up, do you want to say something about the outlook moving beyond 2015 and early 2016? What does it look like? What's our sort of medium-term forecast for Vietnam going into late 2016 and into 2017?
Okay, so we expect, after the economy's grown by more than 6% this year, we expect growth to pick up to 6.5% in coming years, ahead of both Indonesia and the Philippines, driven by the really strong trade position, underpinned by the greater macroeconomic stability, and based on continuing to gain market share from other Asian economies, particularly benefiting from Vietnam is just so well placed to absorb manufacturing activity and jobs that are leaving China, because in China the wages are about twice what they are in Vietnam approximately. So that's a trend we see continuing at the benefit of Vietnam.
I see. Okay. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you everyone for listening. We will come back with further podcasts in the near future.